We've got a limited edition Commander playmat for sale, only available until the end of July. You can get regular Stitch or gold foil signatures from the entire Commander class crew, and you can pre-order it now over at MTGGoldfishMerch.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 390 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well as well. It's a little kind of a rainy, gloomy day here, but we got some really fun Magic topics to talk about, so I'm hyped for that. But before we get into that, we got another co-host in Krim. Krim, how's it going today?
What's up, Seth? Good morning. It's morning, so I'm doing all right.
So today we got a bunch of topics. We have probably our biggest topic is going to be a big sales in the Magic vending community. ChannelFireball being bought by TCGPlayer. So we want to talk about that. We got some announcements about changes to Magic cards themselves coming with Dominaria. Some weird small bits of news. Alchemy Storm still doing its thing. Some Hasbro pricing stuff. A Mutate ruling. A Flesh and Blood thing. Changes on Moto. So we're going to be hopping around from a bunch of small topics today. But before we get into that, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit, and we've been telling you about Card Conduit, an amazing way to sell your Magic collection in their curated shipment service. It lets you sell valuable cards with a reduced service fee for quite a while now, and as long as your cards have a retail value of at least $2, you can send in as many as you want and still just pay a 5% service fee. And as with all of Card Conduit services, you don't gotta sort your cards, you don't gotta grade your cards, you get to skip all those hassles and just safely package everything up and ship it out, and you'll even get a detailed report with their results, so you can check out Card Conduit's curated shipment option as a way to buy list cards with fast processing, optimized prices, and the low service fee of just 5%. And right now, you can even get another 10% off if you head over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you so much to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic, and let's start with really the big news, the seismic news in the Magic market, which is TCGPlayer buying ChannelFireball. Richard, why don't you fill us in on the details?
All right. Seemingly out of left field, TCGPlayer announced that they bought out ChannelFireball. This includes, so ChannelFireball merged with Binder POS. So TCGPlayer is taking the whole thing, which basically includes the content arm, includes their events arm, and then includes their marketplace, which they launched recently, which is kind of like a TCGPlayer competitor. But they basically took everything but the LGS. The LGS split out from CFB a while ago, I think. Yep. Yeah, like just kind of out of nowhere, consolidation of one of the OG stores / content pillars / just big name in Magic.
It's crazy to me how much things have changed. Like, I remember this was back before I really was making content, when I first was like really getting into Magic, like pretty hardcore. It was all about Star City Games and ChannelFireball. Like, Star City was doing their tours. I remember like the dual opens where they do like Legacy on Saturday and then Standard on Sunday, and watching those every weekend. In the pro teams, I probably remember the drama of like the Star City Games stealing ChannelFireball players, and then ChannelFireball like stealing back the SCG pros in this big battle between the pro teams. That was like the biggest thing in Magic probably a decade ago. And it's really wild to see that ChannelFireball, I mean, I guess I don't want to say they will cease to exist, because I don't know what's going to happen as a result of this merger. Maybe TCGPlayer is still going to keep the site running, but they're going to own it. I really don't. We haven't seen the details on it. But really, ChannelFireball is not what it used to be. In Star City Games, they're still, doing events, but they're not doing the tour. They've really stepped back on doing the spike content they were known for. It's wild to me just how much the Magic world has changed over the past like decade or 15 years. Do you think this is a good or bad thing for players? Like, that's my big question. Like, does this hurt players in any way?
I don't know. Like, what do you mean by hurt players, right? Like, are we talking like on a financial like thing, or are we talking about like just like events, or because like there's a lot to like kind of unpack with this, but I'm also Not sure. Like I worry because everything going through one, like, does everything going through TCG Player somehow increase the pricing?
I mean,
indirectly,
it
right?
could.
So, yeah, it's a monopoly, right? Like think of your cable internet or whatever, right? Like consolidation usually is not good for the customer because there's no competition. And when there's no competition, they can do whatever they want. So if you recall back when WotC did coverage and there was CFB coverage and we complained about it and we're like, oh, commentary sucks and blah, blah, blah. There was like SCG coverage to watch, right? We can point to that and be like, oh, but they're innovating in this certain way. And then therefore WotC had to step it up to fight back. But we kind of starting to lose this, right? There's like one giant marketplace. So if tomorrow TCGPlayer decides, hey, seller fees increase by 10%, like who's going to stop them, right? Like nobody. And that will affect sellers, which will then affect buyers, and it will trickle down. Same with the content arm, they have kind of the monopoly on content now, I guess, by buying ChannelFireball for like spike content. They can decide to like do whatever they want with it. So, it's not immediately obvious this is bad, but less competition is usually bad for consumers.
Yeah, that would kind of be my concern, especially on the end of the sellers, because before, like, if you wanted to sell Magic cards or you were a LGS wanting to sell cards online through a big marketplace, you kind of had what? You had TCGPlayer, you had ChannelFireball that just in like the last year or so was trying to be a TCG style marketplace, and then I guess you have stuff like eBay or Amazon, which doesn't always have the best reputation for selling Magic cards, but for Magic specific sites, there's not a lot of options, and now with it kind of just being TCG, that does give them a lot of power. If they say we are going to increase fees, it's not like there's really another place for someone to go. And in the past, if there was ChannelFireball and TCG, if TCG was going to jack up the seller fees, then people could be like, well, okay, I'll move over to ChannelFireball and do it over there. So I guess that would be the indirect concern. I don't think the event aspect probably matters at this point. It feels like it's been a while since CFB events was at least a thing on the national stage. Like we haven't had, ChannelFireball GPs or Command Fest really. It hasn't been like a big thing anymore like it was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 2017, 2018, when ChannelFireball was literally running every GP in the country. Like they had the exclusive contract or whatever with Wizards to run all the GPs. So I don't know if anything really changes on the event end because already nothing was happening. I guess if anything, maybe a TCG decides to fire it up again. Maybe they start running GPs. So I don't know how the events could actually get worse, but I do worry a little bit that this could like indirectly make cards more expensive in the long run. I don't think this would be an immediate impact, but look back a few years down the road, who knows? It could actually make it more expensive. What do you think TCG gets out of buying ChannelFireball? That's kind of my big question, because honestly, ChannelFireball, they haven't been on the stage in the way they were a few years ago. Once they switched to being a marketplace, it just wasn't kind of the same as far as hearing about them on the same level as TCG or Star City Games. What's the benefit for TCGPlayer? Is it really just to try to monopolize the market, essentially?
So I don't know the exact details, but I don't think it's content. I don't think it's events. I don't think it's the marketplace because, like Seth said, they're all kind of floundering and TCGPlayer has them beat. The one thing is the binder POS. So binder POS is kind of like your in-store integration. So like, if you run an LGS, you need to keep track of your singles and price them and sell them and whatnot. And that's what binder POS does. Crystal Commerce is like the market leader that everyone uses and everyone complains about it because it like sucks for whatever reason that I don't know of. But my guess is that TCGPlayer wants binder POS and they want that integration into LGSs so that they can then get a foothold / monopoly on that and like kind of integrate people directly into TCGPlayer. Like imagine if you're an LGS, if you could have one system to run your actual in-store selling and buying, but then at a click of a button, everything's also on TCGPlayer. So you have access to the whole online marketplace. I imagine that's like what they're going for. Because I frankly don't see why they would buy TCGPlayer content or ChannelFireball content or events or things like that. So it's got to be binder POS.
Yeah, that seems likely to me too, and that's kind of what I've heard people like more insidery finance people and vendors talking about, is that that's kind of like the big value is the binder POS system. So maybe that is what really brought the deal about. It'll be interesting to see what happens with content, because Channel Fireball still does produce a lot of content, not just for Magic, but for other games. Like if you go to their YouTube, they have daily videos, usually multiple videos a day. And I don't think it's like super high views, but they do have a lot of content. What do you think is going to happen to all the content producers, creators that are currently under Channel Fireball's purview? Like, do you think TCG keeps them on? Is this going to be another big instance of a bunch of content producers losing their jobs, kind of like we saw with Star City Games a few months ago when they kind of laid off all their Spike content? What do you think about that, Grim? You got any idea what's going to happen on the content end with this change?
Honestly, I think that, I mean, I hope they keep it, right? Like, because Channel Fireball producing more than just Magic was a good thing. So I hope they just keep doing that. Like with Pokemon, I know they did it with like Flesh and Blood. So I hope that it's not that everyone loses their job over that. Because like I guess like I could see the pros staying if the worst case scenario is that they start axing people because, you know, they're still the pros. But I hope not.
I mean, I definitely hope not too. We've already had a pretty big shakeup in the content community with everything happening over at Star City Games, especially on the Spike end. That seems to be where most of it's been. If people like, you know, Reed Duke and Nassif and LSV, like those people aren't making content anymore because of this deal, that would be just another blow, I think, to Spike content, because there are a lot of really Andrea's also on Channel Fireball, Aspiring Spike. They have a lot of really good Spike focused content there, and having that all go away would, I mean, it's scary, the idea of that for the community as a whole. What do you think, Richard? Like, what do you think happens with the content end?
So I think the Magic content end is probably fine. Like either they'll integrate in a TCGPlayer or they'll keep the Channel Fireball brand. But if you actually look at the Channel Fireball YouTube, they have a lot of content for games I've never heard of. And those videos do not get a lot of views. I suspect those might be on the chopping block, right? If there's like new management and they're like, okay, what is the point of this video if it's getting like sub 1,000 views? Like, should we keep it? What is the strategy? It may not align with what CFB had. So those ones I think are at risk. I think, you know, like Nassif, Reed Duke, I don't think they're really at risk, but you know, you never know. Like maybe TCGPlayer wants zero content. But yeah, like, did you know there's a My Hero Academia TCG? I did not.
Yes, I did.
There are a bunch of other weird games I've seen on the CFB
MetaZoo
website
is one that I don't know that pops up. Yeah,
MetaZoo. Like, there's a bunch of weird games that don't get too many views. So I don't know if TCGPlayer has the same focus on these other games. But I guess we'll find out.
So I guess one other question: do you think Channel Fireball continues to exist? Like, how do you think this merger will actually work? Do you think we'll still go to the Channel Fireball YouTube, or do you think the Channel Fireball site itself, like, will you be able to go there and use the marketplace, and it's actually just going through TCG, or do you think all that stuff gets shuttered and like moves over under TCG's banner essentially? Or it could be either.
I'm going to see
really
what's on channelfireball.com right now because I haven't been in so long. Oh, wow. There's no Magic on. Wow. You just go to channelfireball.com and the first thing you see is Dragon Ball Z, Flesh and Blood, MetaZoo, Digimon, and My Hero Academia. And then you press right to scroll, and then there's Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh.
Interesting.
So that seems a little weird, but
I'm gonna be honest with you. Is My Hero Academia even like big enough? I guess it is. I played a little bit of it. That's just surprising to me that that's big enough to make it out there. Because the One Piece card game just launched also.
Is My Hero Academia a pretty new game? Or is this been
it's an
around for a
anime.
while?
That's why we know what it is. But I have no idea what the game is about.
It's an anime. It's brand. But the card game is like what, 3 sets in, and then One Piece. So like I have to imagine that the cool thing that it could happen here is that TCGPlayer, why wouldn't they want more content out there, right? So I actually think they should keep the My Hero content if there is any, and then the eventual One Piece content. Because that'll help the game grow, which means they would be really, if this is probably bad, but if they really want to run that monopoly, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I guess that makes sense. I'm curious. I'm trying to look on the TCG site. I think they currently do content for Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon. Like those seem to be the big supported ones. So I assume that maybe those will continue on, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens with some of the smaller games that they don't seem to currently, at least very obviously, support on TCGPlayer content-wise. It'll be interesting. I really have no idea what to think about that. Do you think, I guess last question, does this mean that TCGPlayer has just kind of won this battle, essentially? Like, do you think there's any world where anyone tries to challenge TCG at this point? Because it seems like what ChannelFireball was trying to do, essentially, is they were going to try to be TCG, and apparently it didn't work, because a year later, TCG is buying them out. So do you think this just means that, really, they're the monopoly? They own the market. They're the Amazon or whatever of the Magic market, at least in North America, and there's just no point in even anyone trying to out TCG because they're so entrenched and so big at this point.
I mean, you could have had this conversation 6 years ago about SCG and CFB, right? So yes, TCGPlayer is dominant right now, but they're not immune. And I know like plenty of players and plenty of or not players, or I guess players, like buyers and sellers complain about TCGPlayer. Sellers complain about the really high fees on the platform. And then buyers complain about like, you know, getting cards that don't match the condition that they're supposed to be getting, right? Or cards coming in like 50 packages or whatnot, right? So they're not immune, right? So there could be another marketplace that comes up. We already have existing marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, and also the other competitor to TCGPlayer is like actual LGSs, right? Like Card Kingdom, SCG. Those are other places that compete, even though they're not exactly the same thing. But like no one's immune, right? Like if they spend all their time investing in My Hero Academia or something, right? And then someone else comes up with a better Magic marketplace, like over time, their share could erode, right? It's hard. Like they have the money. They can always be like, hey, we're losing market share, half price fees for everyone. And then a new upstart can't really compete with that. But, you know, the giants fall, right? MySpace was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Blockbuster was a thing, right? So you can lose your position. So it's not foregone.
It would be interesting if something like Card Market over in the EU went worldwide or came to North America. It seems like that some of the EU versions of TCGPlayer are pretty good. And I guess there's also still like very much smaller competitors, like CardSphere is a site that I haven't used much personally, but it's a site where you can kind of sell and trade your cards. And it's got, I think their site says 40,000 users, which I'm sure is a pretty small number compared to TCGPlayer. So I guess there are still some other options that I don't know a ton about, but it'll definitely be interesting to see.
Is that the next competitor? Like, is that the closest thing to a competitor? I
mean, I think for us in North America, especially from the perspective of someone selling cards, that's kind of why I'm looking for this. If you're buying cards, like Card Kingdom's great. You still got Star City Games. There's a ton of places to buy cards from. You got your local game store. But for selling cards, if you want to like take cards out of your collection and sell them, or you're a small LGS that wants to sell online, then I think that CardSphere is probably the next option, unless you're going to go like the eBay, Amazon route. But as far as Magic specific sites, I think CardSphere is the next best option as far as selling your cards at this point.
But is it selling or is it trading? CardSphere.
So CardSphere does buying and selling and trading. It supports all of it. So you can sell for money or you can trade if you want to.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like these are marketplaces, right? Like the other options you have as a player are buy listing. Like you can buy list to SCG or Card Kingdom. Things like our sponsor, right? Like you can just send in your unsorted stuff and have them, you know, take it. And there's always trading at your LGS and things like that. But you know, if you're a store, right? If you're trying to set up like an online store and sell singles, like you're obviously not going to buy list to SCG, right? But if you're just selling things like randomly here or there, like you have a lot of options still. It's not the end of the world yet.
Yeah, that would be more on like the vendor end or someone who's trying to do it as like a side gig. But as an average player, like there's tons of buy lists. You can use all different things. You can go to a Command Fest or Magic 30 and bring your cards with you and sell them to a vendor for cash right there. So there's plenty of options from that perspective. So it'd be more of the people trying to make a business out of it or a side gig out of it, I think, that might be affected by it. But anyway, that's the big news. Any other thoughts about TCG and Channel Fireball before we hit up some other topics? All right, next up, we just got this news this morning. Wizards announced some changes to the Magic product lineup, starting with Domineer United, our next set coming out the beginning of September. What's changing, Richard?
All right, Wizards has decided to consolidate their languages. So they will no longer publish Magic in Russian, Korean, and Chinese traditional. So that leaves the core languages at English, Japanese, Chinese simplified, French, Italian, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. And they said they will continue support, WPN support for those regions, but the new products will be via English. And then Arena will continue to support Korean and Russian languages online.
So how big of a deal is this? Like, we don't really have a sense of what percentage of cards are sold in each language. I mean, I'm sure that English is the one they sell the most of, but do you think this is like a pretty big change and there were a lot of people buying Russian cards or Korean cards or traditional Chinese cards? Or do you think this is a relatively like small chunk of...
Krim is crying over there. Well, I was getting those Korean Ashioks now.
Yeah, exactly. I do buy all, like, because I mix and match all my languages, right? So I do know I would always buy Russian, German, Korean, and Japanese. So now that is no longer an option, that's a little bit of a bummer. I'll admit, that's a little bit of a bummer.
What's languages next up, Krim? I think you got to replace 2 from your rotation.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I got to sit down and think about it now. Like, I guess it doesn't really matter. I just need to get 2 different languages, but it is a little bit of a bummer to lose out on that, if I'm being completely honest.
Do you think this was just a cost-cutting measure where I assume it's cheaper not to have translators and do the stuff for as many languages? Is this just Wizards trying to save money? Or do you think the whole Russian-Ukraine thing played into this at all? Because I know a lot of especially a couple months ago, a lot of companies came out about not doing business with Russia. There was actually a Humans of Magic podcast talking to Ukrainian Magic players that were saying they didn't think Wizards or Hasbro should do business with Russia. Do you think any of that social political stuff is playing into this? Or is this just simply Wizards being like, we can save money by printing in less languages? Like, it's less people we have to hire. It's less ink we have to, spend or whatever.
I could see it being a little political too with it, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's not political because if they wanted to, they could really step on it, right? Because they're continuing to support Arena in Russian, right? WPN events are still supported. So if they felt like making a political statement, they could have just said like, we don't support Russia, no more Russian Magic cards, no more Russian WPN events, no more Magic Arena in Russia. So I feel like it's just Russians don't play Magic and neither do Korean and traditional Chinese writing people. I don't know who that is. But like, I think like these 3 languages, their cards don't sell as much. So they are just cutting back to save costs. But maybe Krim's right. Maybe there is a little, maybe Russia was just on like the maybe side and like, yeah, we'll just throw it in, like, just take advantage of the geopolitical situation. But I don't know.
Russia's interesting just in the sense that that's like one of the top tier bling languages, like the foil Russian stomping grounds meme and stuff like that. Like that's traditionally like one of the languages.
Is it because it's the smallest print run or something and therefore it's the rarest of the extra languages?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
I mean, when you think about it too, like that's also like with Korean too, right? Like example, the Korean Ashiok is exactly one of those things, like the first printings. So there's a lot of rare things out there that were specifically in Russian and Korean.
I was also wondering, like in Korea or in Russia, I wonder how many people, if they do play, just buy English. I never really considered that. I just assumed that people bought their local language. But then from talking to Phil, being in Germany, and German is another language that Magic is supported in, he was talking about how he just always buys English cards, really, and that's like the normal thing there is to buy English, and it's actually like less common to buy German, even though he lives in Germany. So I wonder if that is any part of it either. Like maybe people who live in Korea and speak Korean, maybe they prefer English cards for some reason. I guess that could also be a possibility.
It's gotta be the other. It's like how like people that watch anime can like kind of read Japanese because they're weebs and they spend the time to learn it as opposed to it actually being like a secondary language. Like I think in Europe, most people speak multiple languages and English is usually one of those that they can speak. Whereas I don't think that's the case in Korea or Russia. And that if you buy English Magic cards, it's because like you're such a fan of Wizards of the Coast, you like learn English and like all you know is like Magic slang. like I think it is more of a that case.
Yeah, I guess that probably makes sense. Well, that's
can you imagine like you can only speak English but only in like Magic words?
I know from like talking to older relatives and stuff, if you talk Magic around someone that doesn't know it, it really is like you're speaking another language. Like our dialect is so far out there that it would be hard. It would be hard if that's the main way.
You speak of, Saffron.
Yeah.
What is Durdle? What are we doing?
Yeah. You're trampling over my weekend plans.
All right, other big news of the week, Moto changes. So Moto, I think we had talked about this before on the podcast. I know I did a video that talked about it, but there was a problem with win trading in a couple of leagues in specific. The smaller leagues, they don't have a lot of players, which are Vintage and Standard. So essentially what would happen is if you would play Magic Online at a low playtime hour, like especially in the middle of the night North American time, there's just hardly anyone in a Vintage league or in a Standard league. And what people figured out they could do is have multiple accounts and essentially queue against themselves from two computers. So your one account would play your other account, and you have one account that would always concede, the other account would always win. And it was actually profitable. You made like $17, I think, for a 5-0 finish, even considering that you had to pay 2 entry fees to do this for all the scooping. So essentially this was a big problem. It was hurting Vintage and Standard, and Wizards announced some changes to Magic Online designed to make this not possible anymore, or at least not profitable anymore. The big change is getting 5 wins is much less valuable than it was before. You used to get 11 treasure chests and 150 play points. They knocked it down to 5 treasure chests and 140 play points. So now the math just doesn't work out. If you go 5-0 and you go 0-5, you're going to take and end up losing value instead of making value. So in theory, you shouldn't be able to win trade anymore. However, there was some bad news with these changes, which is if you actually math out all of the changes they did, and it changes like 3 wins and 2 wins. 2 wins gets a treasure chest now and it didn't before. But if you actually math it out, it ends up being a prize cut of about 10 or 11%, people have figured out. What do you guys think about this? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to have prizes cut by 10% to get rid of the win trading problem? Or is this Wizards just couldn't resist? They had to do something about win trading. They could have done it in a way that prizes stayed the same, but why not, knock a little off the top, since we're changing it anyway. This is our chance to cut prizes by 10%.
I mean, this is just a prime example of this is why we can't have nice things. Like, I don't know. I don't think we should. Like, it sucks that the prize cut happened because, people decided to win trade. Simple as that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, does that discourage you, like the 10%, like from trying to play Moto? I don't think so. I think people will still play regardless of the 10% prize cut.
Yeah,
true, but should they have to?
No, we shouldn't, but we will. And I guess like it flattens the structure, right? So, before you go 2 wins, that's like a feel bads. You kind of get nothing. Now you get, wait, did you get play points or did you just get no treasure chests?
You did get the 50 play points still. The treasure chest is the new thing for 2 wins.
Yeah. So before it was really like 5-0 or bust, right? And you would try to arrange it so you went 0-5 and 5-0 with a 50% win rate. Like that's what you really want to do. So this kind of discourages that. It is a 10% prize cut. I think, like Krim said, we're just going to play it anyways and complain about it, but we'll still play it. Like this is like several prize cuts in a row now we've gotten for leagues. I do wish they did the better thing, which was just detect win traders and ban them, right? So
Yeah.
that you don't.
Yeah.
But I can see how it's hard, and they can't even fit like new commander cards online. You want them to like detect win trading now? Like, don't be ridiculous, okay? Like,
The
this was
technology
their
is just
easy
not there.
fix. This was their easy fix. So I empathize with that, but at the same time, they could have given us a little more prize or even a prize bump. Can you imagine that? Getting people to play Magic Online? Like, that would be ridiculous with that. But yeah, it is what it is.
I mean, they did have to fix it. Something had to be done because it was really keeping people from playing Vintage or Standard. So I think they did have to do something about win trading, and it took a while. This solution I don't think is perfect just because of the prize cut, but it should do the job as far as getting rid of win trading. And I do kind of like the 2-win thing. Like, if there's an upside in some ways, this might be good for new players or worse players, because now if you get 2 wins, if you go 2-3, a losing record, a 40% win rate, you actually get almost all your money back. It costs $10 to join a league, and 50 play points in a treasure chest is like $750 or something. So even going 2-3 and winning 40%, you're losing money pretty slowly playing Vintage or Standard leagues. So I do think that's an upside, although I don't know, I guess it's fine. If you're playing Standard or Vintage on Magic Online, the 2 leagues this affects, you're probably doing it because either you're testing for Standard and you're like an old-time Odo player who just doesn't like Arena, or you just love Vintage. So I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker. I would be surprised if we saw the number of real players in these leagues going down based on this prize cut, even though it's always bad to see a prize cut, but I think people are still going to play.
Down
Yeah,
no
oh
one
yeah.
plays.
Confirmed.
It's like
Moto
Twitter, you
bots.
remove all the bots, there's no one left. You're like, what do I
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
Yeah, that could also be true. We'll see. Maybe there's like one person in the Vintage league now, the one Vintage
Sorry,
player
there's
left.
no more Moto data because all the win traders have left. Sorry, guys.
And,
Yeah.
and then the brawl hero steps in. He senses the
Oh
blood in the water.
my God, you're
Sneaks
right.
in, Vintage champion of the world.
The 2 address them as it should be, the 2-time. All right.
All right, so we got a couple pieces of Magic related, but not directly Magic news. Richard, you brought this one up. Some Hasbro Spider-Man news. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I have a secret hobby. I have another hobby. I like to collect figures. Okay, I like to collect action figures.
I know this.
And Marvel Legends, okay, if you don't know, is like action figures. So like of like Marvel superheroes, right? So Thor, Spider-Man, Iron Man. You can find them in Target, Walgreens, whatever.
Yup.
They're made by Hasbro, our dear Hasbro. And I was just browsing Reddit, and I came across
Small local company.
Yeah, I came across this post about people just like ripping Hasbro a new one. And basically, Spider-Man No Way Home, the movie that was released recently, there's a new 3-pack of Spider-Mans. So 3 Spider-Man action figures. They're being sold for $90 plus shipping, so $105. And people are going ballistic. They're like, I've been waiting so long for my Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and now I gotta pay like $105. Like Hasbro, like is just like raking us over coals, and I'm like, welcome to the club, brother.
Yeah.
Like here's an angry thread
rite
about
of
Hasbro. Hasbro milking its customers for money with collectibles, and I'm like, maybe we should stop collecting things, but. Yeah, it's kind of funny that the whole Hasbro company is just set up to sell premium products at ridiculous markups.
I guess it makes me feel a little bit better as a Magic player to know it's not just us. Hasbro is like screwing over everyone equally, no matter what product they're making. It's not just Magic players that they like to rip off. It's just everyone. Well, I also had a piece of Magic adjacent news I wanted to ask you about. So Flesh and Blood, another TCG, they posted a video last week of someone from Flesh and Blood shredding some promos. Apparently there was like an event promo that they gave out to people who got first place in events, and there was supposed to be only so many of them. And the last event happened and they still had some leftovers. So they just posted a video on their Twitter of them shredding the cards and talking about how, we care about collectability or whatever, which that's fine. Like, I get what they're doing. Like, whatever, Flesh and Blood can do whatever they want. But my first thought when I saw that is, oh my goodness, could you imagine what would happen if Wizards did? Like, could you imagine the reaction of the community if Marrow walked out in a video and had a bunch of like Mutavaults or masterpieces or something and just like dumped them in the shredder while talking about collectability. We've had freakouts over flip it or rip it. Like the professor, I was talking to the professor and he was talking about how he had a video where he like ripped a basic land. And there are people who talked in the comments about being uncomfortable about that. Like they were kind of upset about a basic land being ripped. Could you imagine, what do you think the reaction would have been from the Magic community? Because the Flesh and Blood community was kind of like, whatever. Like, yeah, it's a little painful to watch, but no one was like freaking out about it. How do you think Magic would have reacted if Wizards made that same video?
Oh boy! First off, I think I remember that thread. That was a fun thread. People were a little upset with you, Seth. But
yeah, that was a fun conversation. That's true.
That was a pretty funny conversation, I'll admit. But I mean, Magic players have been upset for a lot less, right? So I think we know what the answer to that is. I think there would have been pitchforks and everything.
I kind of want it to happen now, just to see how people would react to it, just out of morbid curiosity. But
Wizards would never do something so distasteful.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
You think they? I don't think they would ever do such a thing. I think they would get. I don't know. I think the reason why most Magic players don't like it is because it's not only wasteful, but it's like, I don't know. It's like a weird show on like collectability, right? It's like an explicit acknowledgement of like we're keeping prices high, which I don't think people want. I think people know that yes, Wizards cares about secondary market, and they say they don't. But if Wizards came out and said we care about secondary market and we care about keeping prices high, I think people would go ballistic. And I think this video is kind of Flesh and Blood explicitly doing that and through action and showing it. But I think that's a big no-no for Magic players. I know we all know Wizards cares about secondary price market, but they play this song and dance to make us feel good that no, it's about collectability and chase cards or something, right? But you know, they care, and we don't want the illusion to be broken. We don't want it to be explicit, right? And if it's explicit, we go ballistic.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and that is just like such a big topic in Magic, like with proxies and collectability and the reserve list. That's always just been a topic that's been simmering beneath the surface and sometimes boiling over into big conversations. So I think that something like that in the Magic community in specific would just, it would definitely go over very, very poorly, because people are just like always on edge about card prices and availability. That's always just such an important topic to people, and rightly so when you're playing Magic. That's a really expensive game. So yeah, it would go much differently. It was very interesting to me to see that Flesh and Blood players are just like, whatever. Like it must be differences within the community, or it's a newer game, so they haven't been having reserve list conversations for the past 20 years and dealing with all of that stuff for the past 20 years. But it was definitely interesting because it's another card game. Like you would think that the two communities are pretty adjacent, but the reaction to that in specific is very, very different than I would have expected from the Magic community. So
I think you go in expecting that, right? Because like Flesh and Blood like really advertise like the collectability and scarcity and rarity of their cards, right? Like the super expensive in-print cards. So like everyone who plays that game like has accepted this and is okay with it. So therefore the shredding doesn't matter to them as much.
That makes sense. When Magic players like are actively fighting to get cards cheaper and cards are too expensive and coming at it from a very different perspective, I guess. So I guess that does make sense when you think of it that way. All right, next up, we got some Alchemy news. 2 weeks in a row on the podcast talking about Alchemy. This has to be a record of some kind. So last week we talked about Grinning Ignus being banned because of a Storm deck. This week there was actually a big Alchemy tournament, a Croquis Alchemy tournament, and it was the same combo deck, essentially replacing Grinning Ignus with Ominous Traveler and a Sararak, that ended up, I guess, splitting the finals. It went undefeated into the finals and split the finals 10-0. So did Ignus just die for nothing? Like, to me, this is like a pretty clear sign that it's the Alchemy cards that were the problem and not Grinning Ignus. Is that the takeaway from this?
I think so, right? It makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
The takeaway is they don't test Alchemy. Right? Like, I mean, how can they? Like, cards are coming in at not only are you balancing like the new standard cards that are released, right? Like you're making up random alchemy cards and then like rebalancing like 10, 15 staples like every single time. Like who has time to thoroughly test any of this? They can't even get like standard correct, which is like a relatively static pool. You're expecting the same balance team. It's probably not the same balance team, but like a balance team to do this on the fly like every 2 weeks. Like there's just no way, right? I think you just accept this and then expect some kind of super obvious looking ban next cycle, and then something else will just bust through and do stuff. So I think this is what you sign up for Alchemy.
I mean, it does seem impossible to test. And I mean, maybe that's for the people who enjoy Alchemy. Maybe that's one of the upsides of the format is things are just constantly changing very quickly. And sometimes that means broken things and sometimes it doesn't, but you just got to accept when the broken things happen is part of the cost of doing business. But I mean, that's hard to balance and test standard under the old model of 4 sets a year. I can't imagine how hard Wizards' job is when you're doing 4 sets a year and you're doing 4 or 5 Alchemy releases a year in trying to just keep up on all that with all the rebalances that are happening monthly. Like, is it even possible to test this? Like, even if Wizards wanted to put a ton of effort into testing it, I don't even know if you could at that pace. Like, it would be very, very difficult. So I can definitely empathize a little bit with the people trying to test it because it seems just like a unwinnable position to be in. Like, I don't know how you actually do it when you're printing cards at that rate.
Like Alchemy is such a that's just kind of the nature of it. You do got to actually have a team to kind of like work with you on it, or else it can get out of hand pretty quick.
Yeah, no, it definitely can. All right, two other topics before we get to our fish mail. One is Mero announced on his blog, actually answered a question on his blog about enchantment creatures, and they are now deciduous, whatever, you know that word. Deciduous, yes.
Decidui. The Pokemon.
Decidui, exactly. The
Pokemon.
Oh, see, I gotta play more Pokemon, and then I would pronounce things better. That's the problem. I don't play enough Pokemon. But enchantment creatures, it's not quite evergreen, but they're able to show up in any set now. What do you think about enchantment creatures being just a regular part of the game now?
I mean, is this just going to be one of those things where everything becomes an enchantment creature, or is there a purpose to it? That's kind of just what it comes down to.
I think, so deciduous means it comes and goes whenever they feel like it. Which essentially means nothing to me. Like, I don't even know what the point of this declaration is, right? Because tomorrow they could be like, well, we're going back to Dominaria and we haven't seen Infect in a while, so we'll fix Infect, right? That is deciduous all of a sudden. Like, I don't know, right? They can do whatever they want, right? They can bring back Storm, splice into Arcane or whatever, right? So, I don't know. I think this is just them saying that be prepared for more enchantment creatures, but we don't know when they'll come. We don't know how they'll come. We don't know if it's going to be like the aura thing, enchantment creatures, or they're just straight enchantment creatures. So this is like, to me, like non-spoiler season news, right? It's just like, yes, it is a proclamation of something, but like there's nothing you can do about this. I guess keep your enchantresses ready in case you get more enchantment creatures in the future, but like, we don't know what set they're coming in. It could be 2 years from now. It could be next set. It could be 4 years from now. Like, it doesn't really tell us anything.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It doesn't actually give away a ton of information. Speaking of spoiler season, I realized this week that maybe the Magic community, at least on social media, we might need spoiler season constantly as much as Wizards does. Things get a little wonky in Magic Twitter when there's no spoilers to talk about. Things go off the track pretty quickly there. So yeah, maybe Wizards is doing it for our sake. I thought they were trying to profit off of it, but maybe it's like, hey, this is how we keep the children in line on social media, by just giving them spoilers every day.
Things get pretty wild when there's nothing to do.
All right, last non-fish mail topic. We got a rules change for Mutate, sort of. And I'm curious if you guys even knew this was a rule, because I didn't until I saw that was not a rule anymore. Mutate's a really weird mechanic. There's so many weird corner cases. One of those weird corner cases is you could cheat a Phage into play. And Phage, if you don't know it, it's got an ETB that if it comes into play and it wasn't cast from your hand, it kills you, triggered ability. So you can like reanimate a Phage, and if you flash a Mutate creature in on top of the Phage with its you die trigger on the stack, it actually fizzles the trigger. The Phage is considered to be cast because the Mutate creature was cast and the whole pile becomes cast. So this was the rule. I've never actually seen anyone do this in practice, but that has been the rule for the last couple of years, ever since Mutate came out. They just announced a couple days ago, they're getting rid of that rule. Now, if you try to pull off those shenanigans with Phage, it will not be considered cast, and it will not be considered cast, and you will die to the Phage trigger. What do you guys think? The thing I wonder about this is why is this necessary? Like, so few people knew about this or actually did this. Is it really worth actually having a rule about this?
That's exactly where I'm at.
Lots of employees need spoiler season 2. So
yeah.
They're like, we got nothing to do. How about this weird Mutate Phage interaction from like years ago? Maybe we should do something about it.
When was that ever actually a thing of concern? I've never even come across that.
It's a hilarious deck if I knew this rule existed, right? You can like sneak attack in a Phage or something and then mutate it and then kill someone.
Yeah. If I knew it was a thing, I totally would have built that deck. But now
you could just torpor
too late.
Wait a minute. This was like you can torpor.
Yeah, you can
orb
still
this.
torpor.
It's ETB. Yeah, okay. So this is still a deck. Never mind.
There's still ways you can Phage. There's still ways. You just can't do it with Mutate anymore. But yeah, maybe WotC needs spoiler season 2. Everyone's just waiting. Dominaria. Well, we know we're getting Sneak Dominaria spoilers on Thursday, so during the WotC stream. So Wizards has apparently been watching all this Mutate rulings and social media, and they're like, all right, we're gonna do it. I know it's still 6 weeks until the set releases, but let's give them some spoilers.
I feel like Matt Tavok was playing Commander and someone hit him with the Phage and he was like, oh no you didn't. Oh no you didn't. Go get back to the office right now. Call the team up. We're gonna fix this rules.
That's how all bannings and rule changes happen in Commander, right? That's just the in the format.
Somebody on staff
someone dies to something and you're like, yeah, all right, we're getting rid of that.
When was Ikoria? I feel this is so long that it's just such an awkward time. Like, how long ago was Ikoria?
Ikoria had to be 2019, 2020, April 2020 was the release date. So we're two years. In Matt's defense, I'm pretty sure the way it came up is someone asked about the ruling. I don't know what that person was thinking about Phage and Mutate for to ask that question, but yeah.
You just outed every Mutate player.
Oh, all right. I think those are all of our topics for today, which I guess it's time for some fish mail. Richard, take it away.
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Zachary Hinkle1 was thinking about a fixed Ancestral Recall. Single blue mana, instant, target player draws 3 cards. You can't cast instants for the rest of the game.
What?
Ooh. I think that would still be broken. I mean, so if you're looking at it as Ancestral being like a draw go control card, then that would, I guess, make sense. That would be a big punishment. On the other hand, drawing 3 for 1 is busted in like any deck. You don't have to be some instant heavy deck to make it work. So even though that would make it less powerful, I think that card would just still be absurdly broken, right? Like that would be worth paying the companion tax on Ancestral Recall if it meant that you would be able to draw 3 for 1. I guess what it would do is keep you from casting additional copies, so it would sort of be restricted and you'd play it as a one of. But even then, wouldn't that still just be broken?
I think it would be, yeah. Like, that seems
Can you play
absurd.
a deck without instants? Can you storm off without instants? Probably.
You gotta, people would find a way.
But it's such a big, like if there was a companion that said you cannot play instants, would that be good? I feel that's such a huge cost. Like, is this Ancestral Recall worth it? Like, it has to be like a storm deck that can go like sorcery speed storm or something, but like, is that even good? I don't know. But this one's kind of interesting.
All right. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, okay, maybe.
You just Teferied yourself. Like, you really want this? Like, you know how annoying 3 fairy is? Like, do you really want this?
Sick 3 fairy. I did it to myself.
You blanked their 3 fairies. You meted them.
The fact that you can't cast additional copies, maybe that would make it okay. Like, maybe that would be fine. Maybe it would be okay, because there would be a cost to putting a bunch in your deck. And it's not like Companion where it starts in your hand each game, because we have seen like Yumori all creature decks or whatever. They haven't been very good, but they have been things that people have done at various times. But with a Companion, it actually like it's there all the time and you can build around it. I don't know, maybe if this just being a card floating around in your deck with that big of a drawback, maybe I still think someone would find a way to break it. I think it'd be okay in most decks, but there's probably a deck that would find a way to break it.
It'd be bad in almost every deck except the one that does break it, then it's absurd.
It'd be like Lion's Eye Diamond or something. Like, it's like you can't just slam it in a deck, right? But if you build around it, it might be insanely broken. So I would put it in that category, I think. I played Bing. I don't understand why WotC would ban a card if the reason for not altering it is it would be unplayable. Either way, it's out of the format. Is there really a pragmatic difference?
So I think the difference is this, and this is, I'm sure, in regards to Grinning Ignus, but I think if you changed the card and rebalanced it, that would also affect it in other formats, like Historic, for example. So I think that by banning it, what that does is it lets Historic players still use the real quote-unquote version of Grinning Ignus. Not that that's like actually a super powerful thing. I think that in Historic in specific, Ignus is like an against odds card essentially, but I think that would be the upside. Like if you rebalance it, the rebalance is going to hit other formats as well, but if you ban it, the other formats can still use the current version of it.
Next question, Paul Barco. So this might be a hot take, but if one of the objectives of the Fortnite secret layer is to bring interest in from other games, shouldn't the cards be standard legal reprints?
Ooh.
Probably would help a little bit.
I think in 2022, if you started Magic, you'd be playing Commander.
That's
Or
also,
Arena.
yeah.
Like I think that
Arena.
maybe Arena, that would be the upside of standard legal, is maybe you can get crossovers from people who are used to playing Fortnite, digitally, and would be like,
but you play
maybe
Alchemy
I'll
by
give this a
default,
try. Yeah.
Fortnite
Yeah, that's the
Alchemy secret
downside.
layer, just to troll the entire community all at once.
Oh wow! Oh, that'd be so good. But that would be the upside, I think.
I think Arena. I think they should have had a strong Arena tie-in. But yeah,
Because that's what a Fortnite player would play. Like it's a big ask to be like, hey kid who plays Fortnite, will you go out and buy paper cards and find a play group and go to a local game store and play Commander with them? It's not a very big ask to be like, hey, are you tired of Fortnite for a few minutes? Why don't you download this free to play game that we made and try your Fortnite cards that we made? So I feel like Wizards definitely could have embraced that more if that's part of their plan to get Fortnite players to play Magic.
Hey kid.
I always think of my little nephew when I talk about Fortnite and Magic because he plays both of them. So
It's just
funny,
funny. Like,
Fortnite players. I'm so confused. What do all the boomers play if you want to play a battle royale? Is there some other battle royale to play?
Hey,
PUBG,
Commander.
Commander. Yeah.
PUBG.
The original Commander.
We need a Magic survival game. Actually, you know what we need? I'm
Commander.
shocked they haven't done this game. I guess it kind of is Commander. I'm shocked they haven't made an auto battler yet. Like Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Or Storybook Brawl. Like, you could do it with Magic cards. Hearthstone does it with Hearthstone cards. I'm so surprised that they haven't done that because those games are actually pretty popular. Like, Battlegrounds is Hearthstone at this point, essentially. Like, that's what most people play.
But with the game function. Like, that's what I'm wondering here. Because, like, that sounds a bit advanced.
They're still trying to program standard cards, Seth. They're busy investing in Alchemy. How can they do this auto battler thing?
Like you're moving 5,000 miles an hour here.
Wait, does no one play Hearthstone anymore? They just play some auto battler now? What is going on?
Battlegrounds is like the premier mode now on Hearthstone. Yeah, people.
It's actually
don't really
in
actually play
Hearthstone
Hearthstone.
client.
It is in the client, yeah. So that's the mode that everyone plays if they play it now, I think, or most people.
Huh. Yeah,
it's actually fun. Like, auto battlers are kind of fun. Magic seems like such a natural way to do it.
Seth, you're not allowed to play any games outside of Magic. Can't say Fortnite is fun. Can't say auto battler is fun.
I don't know if I say
you're not
Fortnite's
allowed
fun.
to enjoy games.
I just die in Fortnite, but auto battlers are kind of fun.
All right, last question. Outgoing Otaku. Recently, because of the shift of MH2 and the sheer volume of cards making up the meta, old modern staples have become more affordable than ever, and my cube couldn't be happier. Getting Goif and Bob for only 10 euros each. Are there cards you're getting now that they're cheap? Goif. Cube All-Star, that's what he's been.
Yeah. Is Goif a Cube All-Star? I actually don't.
That probably sucks in Cube.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's that good in Q, but it's
That
cheap
seems
now.
so
It's
bland.
budget.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Well, Dark Confidant's like cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Dark Confidant's cheap. I mean, it is pretty amazing just how cheap a lot of those cards are compared to where they used to be. I remember like Arcbound Ravager being $80 or something, and like they were just so expensive, and now so many of those old staples have just fallen out of favor and been reprinted a few times. And so many of those cards, if they don't see playing Commander, are like $5, $10, $15 when they were like $50 cards before, which I mean, I guess is a good thing. I don't know how impactful it is to Modern in specific, because, you know, if they're not playable, like, does being cheap really do much of anything? But it's definitely great if you just want to collect them, or if you're building cubes with them, or who knows, maybe they'll come back. What do you think, Richard? Are we going to see Goif again? Will it have another day in the sun in Modern?
Goif is done.
No, it's done.
Goif
A lot of things would have to be deleted.
Yeah, Goif. We need like pre-modern. Like, you know how like standard is like a rotating format to keep the old broken cards out? But now in
gotta keep the new
2022 is the
cards out.
opposite. I need an old format to keep the new cards out from overshadowing Goif and Bob, you know? Like, I want to play like 3 drops, okay? Like 4 drops. Like, even with lures
Bloodbraid
out of the
Elf,
format,
lol.
no one plays any of these cards because they're so like inefficient for their costs, right?
Or they can just print Mega Goif, and then
Me-
that'll...
Yeah.
What would Mega Goif even be? That is my question to you. What
Double its health and toughness.
would
That's
Murktide
what
Regents?
double.
Is
Yeah.
that what it is?
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe Double would do it.
Do you
That
remember
would
when
be pretty scary.
when we were playing Hooting Mandrills? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They should just give Goif hexproof. I think that would solve everything.
Ew.
You can't pick him
Do I-
off, but you can beat him in combat with like literally every other creature in Modern, so it's fine.
I don't know if I want Boggles playing Goif. That actually sounds annoying. But yeah, that would make it a lot better. Maybe, yeah, some sort of protection would probably help. Goif just dies too easily now.
Protection from instants. How about that? Give him the old Evercold treatment. I should get a playset of Goifs now. Just ensure.
Yeah.
You don't have one already?
No, I do, but get a second one.
Get a
Get a
art do you
spare
play?
copy for when he comes meta again, you know. I can collect all the
Invest in-
different artworks. All the
Oh
preview
yeah, yeah. Okay,
versions.
that would. Okay, well you don't need 4 of that. You just do 1 of each.
Buying
It's an
Goifs
EDH
now for the
playset.
buying Goifs now for the inevitable comeback is a risky financial move, I think. That may or may not pan out.
Buy while it's hot.
Yeah.
It's like the
Tournament's
highs and
coming
lows
back.
of owning Jund, right? You buy it, it's cheap, and then it's like, oh, it's so expensive now. Goif is like $120. Like, oh, my Jund deck is so expensive, and now my Jund deck is now budget again. Like all these Goifs and Bobs and Lilies, like dragging down the price.
Sweet
I'm
budget
actually-
brew, Richard.
Budget
Wow.
brew, Goif, Dark Confidant.
I wonder what your build is worth now. Like with all the price decreases, maybe it is pretty cheap at this point. If you don't have all the new cards, like the Ragavans and Rens and stuff that are so expensive.
So you remember the first Vegas we went to, or maybe the second Vegas, where I was like, I had Jund, and I need to
Yeah.
upgrade it because of Modern Horizons. And I'm like, okay, what do I need? I need Renin 6s, seasoned Pyros, and I'm like, I need $400 worth of cards to upgrade my Jund deck to be
Casually, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't think so. So
And-
if we ever upgrade, I would need Ragavans, we would need Renin 6s, we would need a lot of money worth of cards to to get my build up to speed.
I mean, that's what Wizards probably wants, though, right? Like, if one of their concerns about Modern is people just keep playing the same cards and don't gotta buy cards, like, now they found a way. Like, you gotta update your Jund deck, spend $300 to get Rens when Modern Horizons 1 comes out, and then 2 years later, Modern Horizons 2, another $300 on Ragavans and maybe some Urza Sagas. Like, maybe that's just like the goal, and it's working exactly the way Wizards intends.
Yeah, I think it's working out exactly the way they wanted to.
I don't know
right?
if they intended me to play Stranglerootgeist and Kalitas and
Okay.
Hunt
Well,
Master of
hold
the
on, hold on.
Fells in 2022, but that's what they're getting.
You leave Kalitas off of that list, all right? I don't know
Kalitas
what
is
you're
there.
doing.
I got
over
my
there.
zombie tokens and everything. I'll be like, I lightning bolt your Birds of Paradise. Get a little zombie. That was some good old fair magic.
I don't know why. I still don't know why Kalitas is on this list, right? I love that card.
All right. So thank you to everyone who sent in fishmail questions. If you have future questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 390 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard Krim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about early Dominaria United spoilers and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have a wonderful week, everyone. And this is a crew signing out.